begin with our big story, the fighting resuming between Israel and Hamas, as a damning report from the New York Times raises new questions about the Israeli security establishment. The newspaper reports that Israel obtained Hamas's battle plans more than a year before the October 7th attack. According to the Times, one veteran analyst warned that the plan was, quote, designed to start a war, but senior Israeli officials dismissed it as merely aspirational. Joining me now is ABC News contributor and former senior operations officer for the CIA, Darrell Blocker. Darrell, thanks so much for being here. What's your initial reaction to this reporting from the New York Times as far as how much of a failure this was from the intelligence of Israel and also from the leadership of the Israeli government?
So, Elizabeth, I was shocked, but not shocked, if that makes any sense. The fact that this thing was so intricate and so well executed, it would have been surprising if the Israelis didn't hear at least some aspects of the story. But to learn that it was the entire plan mapped out, was known a year in advance, is disappointing. Now, Hamas has never been, the A team. Hezbollah was before them. The Islamic Republic of Iran, of course, was before them. The civil war in Syria was a concern. So Hamas, who's been around for 30 plus years, has never been the focal point, the sole focal point of the Israeli Defense Forces, and now they are.
Well, and you point to the detail of this plan that the Times lays out. They say that in July, an analyst wrote to intelligence experts that Hamas was conducting training exercises, basically practicing the exact strategy that we would then witness militants carry out 2 months later in that horrific terrorist attack. Why do you think that that intelligence, so soon to when this happened, still wasn't taken seriously, if true?
Unfortunately, the internal division that they have within Israel right now, they were more focused on Bibi Netanyahu and the political situation. And yes, they did take their eyes off of the more prevalent and more prescient threat, which was Hamas, Hezbollah, and et cetera. Pearl Harbor, we learned after the fact. That we knew something. 9/11, we knew it was coming. So it's not particularly surprising that the Israelis were not aware of this, but aspiration turned to inspiration pretty quickly on the 7th of October.
Right, and of course hindsight is 20/20, but from your perspective, having worked in the CIA, if this intelligence had been taken more seriously, could this attack have been prevented in the first place?
Perhaps delayed, but I'm not sure about prevented. Unfortunately, the defense and security forces have to get it right every single time, whereas the terrorists, the outsiders, the extremists only have to get it right once.
And Darrell, I do just want to ask you one more. A U.S. official tells us that the U.S. did not have information about this, didn't seem to know about this plan. Is it normal that this intelligence wouldn't have been shared with the United States? How, should we be expecting that that's the case, given how close of an ally the U.S. and Israel are?
So, Elizabeth, I spent 25 of my 28 years at CIA chasing terrorist targets. It is the one issue that is probably more shared amongst friends and allies and even some frenemies. So it's kind of shocking that no one in the Israeli Mossad or Shin Bet or in the security services would have shared even portions of this report with their U.S. allies. That's disappointing and, quite honestly, not up to the level of expectations when it comes to a liaison relationship between our services.
Right. Okay, Darrell, stick with us. I want to bring in the rest of our big story to the rest of our panel. Joining us, we have ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host Mike Muse, ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson, ABC News contributor and former Department of Homeland Security official Elizabeth Newman. Elizabeth, I want to go to you. You say that this conversation I've been having with Darrell, this idea that intelligence was ignored, feels like September 11th. Why?
You know, it is hard to stay as vigilant as we need to be in the counterterrorism world all the time. I think the failure was different than 9/11. We did not have an entire plan from al-Qaeda to take planes into buildings. We had bits and pieces of information, and we didn't connect dots, and there were reasons why we weren't able to connect those dots, mainly due to law and policy preventing the share of information. But here, they actually had a full battle plan and basically dismissed it, dismissed analysts raising alarms multiple times. And I have some empathy. There is some challenge when you're the commanding officer and you're getting lots of new threats and different stories every day, and it's hard to know which are actually going to manifest, where you apply your limited resources to protect your community. Nevertheless, they didn't heed this intelligence, and that's a very different type of failure than we saw in 9/11. But one of the other places where I think there is an overlap is bin Laden told us what his intent was. Hamas told the world when they were founded, and then repeatedly since then, what their goal is, and it's the destruction of Israel. And you can read, and if the New York Times reporting is accurate, what that the boss of the analyst that said they're never going to do this. There's a misunderstanding of intent, and that is part of the reason that the attack was successful.
And part of what we're seeing now as the war continues on. Elsie, how do you think that this reporting that Israel kind of ignored these risks will change people's perception of the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas?
You know, I will tell you from the outside looking in, it appears as if arrogance was a factor, which is, very, very upsetting considering, what Israel has been dealing with for the past 60 to 70 years, and to have an analyst actually refer to historic marks that impacted Israel, trying to warn about what was happening, and still those warnings were being ignored. It sounds as if it was being guided or misguided by, one, arrogance, but also, two, perhaps distraction. As you may recall, much of the year in Israel has been wrapped in protest because of the Supreme Court sort of recalibration that Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to guide, in addition to the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu himself was on trial. So there's all this protest and upheaval happening in the months leading up to the attack, and it appears from the New York Times reporting that arrogance blinded them from seeing the warning signs. It's not a good look.
Not a good look. And Mike, I'll go to you. Does this compromise the relationship in any way? Do you see it between the U.S. and Israel, obviously one of our key allies in the region, one of our strongest allies overall, especially from an intelligence sharing point of view? What does this do to the optics of that relationship?
I think the optics looks really bad, and I think that now the U.S. will have to analyze the intelligence that Israel actually puts forth, and actually needs to probably ask a lot more questions regarding the intelligence. Part of the reason why we have such a strong alliance with Israel is to understand what is happening in the Middle East, and part of that is trusting the intelligence that Israel provides. Israel normally has really good, strong intelligence by every stretch of what has been in precedent in the past. But for this one to be so egregious, I think now that we're going to have to question it more. And what really struck out for me was the word that was used by the Israeli officials on audacity. They said that Hamas doesn't have the audacity to pull something that off, which lets me know that sometimes you have to read data when looking at intelligence, but sometimes you have to understand human dynamics and will, and they didn't read the frustration that many Palestinians was feeling with relationship to Israel and really wanting to have equity in the space for them to coexist.
Daryl, I'll give you one quick last word here. Does this change the conflict at all going forward? And as Mike points out, that kind of potential tension in this relationship between the U.S. and Israel?
I don't think it changes it that much. The United States is not going to abandon Israel. The United States is not going to abandon the Palestinian Authority, the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the other allies who are helping us in this this peace, hopefully peacemaking effort that the president is trying to do. So no, it's not going to change that much. Disappointing, but Israel is not. The TVs and movies had made them out to be invincible. They're not. They make mistakes. They're humans, and I know there were analysts who have been working on this, reporting on this, who were absolutely devastated on the 7th of October when everything they had been talking about was laid out in a brutal fashion for the world to see.
Everyone
Elizabeth,
devastated.
I can really quickly, what Daryl said is absolutely right. But for me, what makes this something that is more a warning sign for the U.S. is that this was system of checks and balances that went unchecked. They were involved in decision making, and none of those people who made decisions seemed to believe the data they were looking at. That's alarming.
And there are checks in place for a reason. We could go on, and there's so much to do just looking back. Continue the conversation later. Mike, Elsie, Elizabeth, and Daryl, thank you all so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.